Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd, where we foster confessional integrity, liturgical preservation, and preaching that doesn't stink. We believe that the historic liturgy of the divine service is more than mere cobwebs of antiquity, but it is a true treasure of the Church to be dusted off and brought down from her attic to be enjoyed. So let's get dusting.
Welcome back to the Gottesdienst crowd. This is Jason Braaten. Today we have back with us Dave Petersen. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We are looking at the Gospel reading for the 16th Sunday after Trinity. It comes from Luke chapter 7, verses 11 to 17, and I'll read that in the English Standard Version. Soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a great crowd went with him. As he drew near to the gate of the town, behold, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and a considerable crowd from the town was with her. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her, and said to her, "Do not weep." Then he came up and touched the bier, and the bearers stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." And the dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Fear seized them all, and they glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has arisen among us, and God has visited his people." And this report about him spread through the whole of Judea and all the surrounding country. All right, so context in Luke, and perhaps even the Bible. What do you got?
Well, it's just that you have the Sermon on the Plain, and then the healing of the centurion's servant, and the great faith, and then, boom, this. And then immediately after this is John the Baptist in jail sending his disciples. So it's early in the ministry of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. And when John the Baptist is in jail, you have those great prophecies from Isaiah about what the Messiah would do, and the ones not listed there are cleansing the lepers and raising the dead.
Interesting.
But the release of the prisoners, and so there's kind of like this, not that John the Baptist was in like major spiritual doubt, but he's like, what gives? We know you're the Christ. You've done all these other things, plus some. When are you going to release the prisoners?
Right.
But I'm curious. Yeah. I wonder if there's anything too that he adds to it. Is he claiming here because of the cleansing of the lepers and then the raising of the dead that like one greater than Elijah and Elisha has come?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, go tell John what you've seen and heard, right? Mm-hmm. All these messianic miracles: the blind seeing, the lame walk, lepers cleansed, deaf hear, dead are raised, the poor. Yeah. Why does he leaves out the prisoners, but he adds the dead? Yeah. Is that what you said?
Yeah. I mean, that's not what's recorded in Isaiah.
Right. So those are the 2 points of distinction, what's left out and what's added.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, it does seem like he's, in other words, you're not getting out of prison, but you're going to die, but you are going to be raised. So,
yeah. I wonder, if there's, we're not, because he doesn't say the prisoners are released there, even though that's what Isaiah says.
Yeah.
So,
well, it does have this resurrection happening. That I never thought of that before. How that might actually, the raising of the widow's son in Nain is a comfort to John in prison.
Yeah.
Good.
So, and perhaps that resurrection is the real release from the prison of sin. Maybe you could say it that way. Right. I don't want to say the prison of the flesh, but
right. What good does it do you to get out of prison if you're just going to die and go to hell? Right.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that raises a question for me. Do you try to make a distinction at all between like resurrections and resuscitations? I've heard some people do this, and I've just kind of, I understand the point, but does it take away from what Jesus is actually doing here? I
think there is a distinction. It does but I think the point of these, if these are resuscitations technically, in other words, if these people are brought back from the dead, but they die again, which is the way it's traditionally been read.
Right.
Though I do have a friend that thinks none of them died again, but they were just what's the word for assumed into heaven eventually, sort of like Enoch. They're not the wandering Jew or the what's that? Isn't that the wandering Jew? What's that called? It's supposed to be Lazarus, right? You don't that legend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, we don't believe that. So there's no wandering Jew. Plus, we think Lazarus is a Christian, like his sisters. But in any case, that there is a distinction in the gift that they are given, and that it's proleptic, and it's a foreshadowing of what's to come. It's not the full thing. But you could say that of the healings as well. Right?
Yeah.
Just because somebody's healed doesn't mean he lives forever after that. I mean, maybe the Samaritan leper got leprosy again and died of it. It seems sort of awful, but it's not impossible. These aren't the full miracle, right?
Yeah.
So, but I don't like calling it resuscitation. I think I get the distinction, and I think it's a significant distinction, but at the same time, these are resurrections, Yeah. We're not talking about the other miracles as though, he fed the 5,000, but they got hungry again. So, we can't really say they were filled. Well, yeah, we can. I mean,
a resuscitation seems to me like they weren't dead.
Oh, I see. Yeah. That's right too.
Like, because our common use of the term is, when we resuscitate them, it's they stopped breathing, but they're still within the time of bringing them back to life, right?
Yeah, well, that's interesting you bring that up, because with these other resurrections, you have kind of an escalation. It seems to me that Jairus's daughter, is very recently dead when she's raised. The boy is raised by Elijah and Elisha, but then they're like dead in their beds. They haven't been carried out. This guy's carried out, about to be buried. Then, of course, Lazarus is buried. Is all the way. So you do have a kind of...
and then the grave's opening at Christ's Passion, right? They're long dead.
That's right. They're long dead. Yeah, that's right. No, that's yeah. So you do have a kind of a continuum there. Some of these people do sort of, kind of meet the idea of the modern idea of the guy that's resuscitated, but the ones that are in their graves, or this guy, certainly couldn't be understood that way. They're full on dead for days at minimum.
Yeah.
So
that's why I prefer saying it's a resurrection, but it's not the same kind to life eternal there.
Right. That's right. Their bodies don't seem to be glorified, right?
Yes.
They're not given the spiritual body of 1 Corinthians 15. They're just given back earthly life for, a certain amount of time.
So maybe we could do a compare, so if we're going to compare the resurrection on the last day, getting the glorified body, so let's compare and contrast these kinds of resurrections to what we, how is it proleptic? How is it, giving us the future, but not fully?
Well, I mean that it's the big difference is the body, right? And I think also confirmed in bliss. I don't see any reason to think that these people would stop sinning when they're resurrected. Right? That's
yeah.
I mean, I guess we don't know. We don't know those things for sure, but the way this has commonly been read and understood is that they're just coming back to earthly life as Christians, and they're just given kind of like Hezekiah, just given a few more years, right?
So this
I was going to look at.
This is like a perfect opportunity to teach on the doctrine of the resurrection.
Yeah. So here's the passages I think I would jump to. 1 Corinthians 15:40, there are also celestial bodies and terrestrial bodies, but the glory of the celestial is one and the glory of the terrestrial is another. There is one glory of the sun, another glory of the moon, and another glory of the stars, for one star differs from another star in glory. So also is the resurrection of the dead. The body is sown in corruption and is raised in incorruption. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. And so it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. So I think that's it. It's that I think probably the boy from Nain, is raised in corruption, is raised in dishonor, is raised in weakness, is raised a natural body.
Yeah. So that's interesting that St. Paul uses natural against spiritual instead of physical versus spiritual. So the spiritual body remains physical, material.
Yeah, but I think that's right. But I think also the spiritual body is different than the body that was given to Adam in the garden in perfection.
Okay. What are your reasons for saying that?
I don't know if I have any reasons.
I mean, sometimes that happens. Sometimes we have a picture of something but haven't quite put our finger on why it's the case. That's fair.
Well, is it maybe because, right, we have borne the image of the man of dust, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly man. And flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does corruption inherit incorruption. So, I mean, there is this, right? We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. So I think that this change is Adam in the garden was corruptible, right? I mean, he was corrupted. So he had to have been corruptible before that. But the corruptible is going to put on incorruption. The mortal, he was mortal in the Garden of Eden.
Right.
And now it's going to put on immortality. So I think that's the reason.
Yeah, he was mortal insofar as he was not receiving the fruit from the tree of life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, he had the ability to, but there's going to be this, now we're going to be like the holy angels sealed in bliss, so that, there's no more moving us.
Did you happen to look at Pieper at all for this?
I did not look at Pieper on this.
That might be probably a nice place to start. You get all the Bible passages listed. Again, if you're going to teach on the resurrection and the distinctions as you were talking about, he's going to list all those things there.
Yeah. Or also John Stevenson. I would probably go to Stevenson with the eschatology volume.
Yeah.
He has a whole section there. You've also got though I got it from the library. I don't own it. But Detlef Schultz wrote a book on anthropology for the Concordia Dogmatic series. And I think he deals some with the raised body.
Okay.
And then another place in terms of modern dogmatics is Scare deals with it, and also in his did Scare write the baptism one? Who wrote the baptism one?
Scare did.
Okay. Yeah, he's got quite a bit of resurrection stuff in there too. So
you could probably go to like Heinrich Schmid, which is not as exhaustive as Pieper, but he's going to have all the Bible passages.
Okay.
You could go to the Schwann part of the Catechism too.
Oh yeah, you probably could. Well, it is. So there's not a lot. I didn't look in those, but I don't think that there's a lot in the Old Testament about resurrection. I mean, it's there, and I don't mean to say that the passages. Yeah, you have those two that we mentioned by Elijah and Elisha, and you have maybe Jonah, right? And maybe the Exodus itself is also a kind of rebirth
maybe Enoch,
or resurrection.
Not resurrection
maybe
of the
Enoch,
dead, but
yeah. Right. Ezekiel 37 with the valley of dry bones. So, I mean, I don't mean to say it's insignificant, but it's not like a dominant kind of theme.
Yeah.
I mean,
the return after the conquest too, rebuilding of all those things.
And you have Psalms that certainly talk about, the land of the living and, something not going to Sheol and seeing corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel 12 is probably the most explicit passage. You have the many who sleep in dust will awaken, some to everlasting life, some to everlasting condemnation.
Yeah. Job 19.
Job 19, and I mean, that's the really big one, I think, as well, where he actually, again, right, expects to actually be alive in his body.
Right.
So with his own eyeballs to see this. So they're not insignificant, but we probably got about all of them right there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that was a dozen.
Yeah.
And when look at the volume.
Yeah. So we already talked about how there's like this increasing nature, intensifying nature of the resurrections before Jesus's death. But there's actually 7. Does that mean anything? So you've got the son at Zarephath in 1 Kings 17 by Elijah, the Shunammite son in 2 Kings 4 by Elisha, the man who's raised because he falls on Elisha's bones in 2 Kings 13. Then the son at Nain, Jairus' daughter, Lazarus, the graves at Christ's passion. So those are all 7. And then Jesus is the 8th. Is there any significance to the number? Or is this just going to be speculative?
Of course, it's speculative in a sense. But if we believe these details are all deliberate and significant and that they didn't happen accidentally, I think there is a kind of fullness there. Surely even without the numbers, even if the math hadn't worked out, even if there would have been 665 resurrections before Jesus, so that his was the 666th, we would still say, according to the analogy of faith, without any hesitation, that Jesus' resurrection is the defining event and the fulfillment of the new or the beginning of the new creation. He's the firstborn of the dead, right? So, the fact that the numbers line up seems to me that we shouldn't poo-poo that and say that that's just coincidence. That seems like a divine pattern and plan that's being
creation
shown.
is fulfilled, and then his is the new day.
Yeah.
The beginning of the new week.
No, that's right. He's the firstborn. He's ushering in. And then you do have 2.
In Luke, he's the one who says on the 8th day after the resurrection. The first day of the week.
First day of the week. You do have 2 resurrections in Acts also, both Peter and Paul.
Yeah.
And the Tabitha one, doesn't he I can't remember now, doesn't he stretch himself out over like Elijah? Or did I just make that up?
I can't remember.
Eutychus, or however you say that, he falls out the window. That's a fun one.
Yeah.
But I thought
he's so tired because Paul drones on.
I know it. Okay. I thought let me see. Peter arose, went to them. When he had come, they brought him supper. The window stood by weeping, showing him. Peter put them out. No, I just made that up. There's none of that. Why did I think that? No, I don't know. Never mind.
Is there any significance to the man who's raised from falling on Elisha's bones?
That's a weird one because he's a Moabite. I'd like to know if he became a Christian in that.
Is he a Moabite?
I think he's a Moabite. They just throw him in because the people are coming. It was kind of irreverent on their part. No. Because the Moabites were coming. There was a man who had died. I thought he was a Moabite.
As a marauding band was seen, and the man was thrown into the grave of Elisha. So I wonder if he, I don't know, does he stand and fight? He stood on his feet. He revived and stood on his feet.
Nice. I was thinking it was a Moabite. Okay. Yeah. There you go. That's sort of like the shadow of Peter, healing somebody, seems to me. It reminds me of that, this sort of, this divine presence in the relic,
Well, you have the similarity, don't you? That, but it's in reverse. So the dead man touches dead man's bones and is raised.
Yeah.
Jesus, the living one, touches the place where death sits, the bier, and he's raised.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it is interesting. I think we've probably said on here before. I think one of the reasons that the miracles are so different one from another is to keep us from superstition, or at least to slow us down. Right?
Oh.
If every time a mute was healed, it was by sticking your finger in his ear, touching his tongue, looking up to heaven, we would try to do it.
Yeah.
And I wonder, there's a similar diversity in these resurrections. There's not a clear pattern.
We'd all become snake handlers and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. So, that is funny that, right, like, why is it that this guy rises from touching Elisha's bones? Why doesn't Elisha rise?
Well,
but
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. But it is interesting to think about this. Then, I think you do see a real emphasis in the apostolic, in Acts, and then in Paul's letters, this emphasis on the resurrection. That is a New Testament theme that is, it's not completely distinct from the Old Testament, but it becomes this emphasis that's significant. The growth of this doctrine and the centrality that it takes. I think I was thinking about this. I wonder if we
Do you
could
think that's because we've tended to read the Old Testament through like Pharisaical eyes, that it's all about the law, and so we don't read it the way actually Jesus reads it?
I don't know about that. I don't.
Okay.
Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm missing it. I was going to say it seems to me like the Old Testament emphasizes creation. It's so that it's like what's being emphasized is a restoration of creation. That creation is going to go back to the Garden of Eden in this kind of idealistic, place with, land flowing with milk and honey, all that kind of imagery.
Yeah,
whereas
but I've always seen that not as like a restoration of the Edenic paradise, but rather that God's order will be put back into play. Like it will be ordered as God desires it.
Right. But I think that's right. I think that's the same kind of thing. But then the New Testament, I think after the resurrection of Jesus, it gets elevated. That it's not just a restoration, but it's a new earth. And that the newness of it, and even of things like, in heaven, they will neither be given nor taken in marriage. And we'll have these spiritual bodies that are incorruptible, and will be, you have in the New Testament depictions of the saints being in heaven rather than on earth. Mm-hmm. Right? Like in Revelation. And I don't know. I don't think that they're contradictory to one another, but it does seem like, I think there's an elevation I think there's a movement from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And again, I'm not saying it doesn't exist in the Old Testament, but boy, the way Paul talks is pretty exaggerated compared to even Job 19, right? All Job says is he's going to stand in the end upon the earth. But Paul's been to the third heavens, and then John, actually looks into this. And like in Ezekiel, when Ezekiel sees heaven, he doesn't, I don't think he sees people there. When Isaiah, has the vision of heaven, he's a man of unclean lips. He has to be cleansed. But John actually sees the saints with palm branches there, with the Lamb, and with the cherubim and seraphim and, all that. The four-faced creature, the whole bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe that's the major distinction, that when you actually have the resurrection of Jesus, God in the flesh, that changes everything. So
exactly, yeah.
So that it's not like things are just put back together, but they're put back together and made right, but plus.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's greater than Eden is the point. And I don't mean to say that again, that's a brand new idea.
Yeah.
But I think it becomes the idea So I know I've listened one time.
Before you get there, how often though is that the case that we have a certain expectation of God's goodness and his bestowal of gifts, and they end up being so much more than what we ever anticipated? So is it really that odd that we would read it in a particular way, but then, Paul is telling us, no, you should expect more.
Yeah.
It's bigger.
It's bigger. Yeah. Well, you do have a little bit of that idea in the epistle reading, because you have Paul talking about, where does it start here? In Ephesians 3, that he says, you have this promise of this request by Paul for us, for the spiritual indwelling of Christ, that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the width and length and depth and height, to know the love of Christ which passes knowledge. And so you have this, that's a marvelous thing, that the spiritual indwelling of Christ through faith causes us to know things that are unknowable, right? Mm-hmm. That is the love of God, which is unknowable, and yet which we do know by faith, and are filled with the fullness of God. And then the very next verse, which I think maybe is beyond, it's part of the reading. Now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we ask or think, according to the power that works in us, to him be glory. So you definitely have that idea, that he gives more than we ask or even desire, or could even imagine. Mm-hmm. So,
and that
I was going to say that,
not just to comprehend, but to have the strength to comprehend. That it requires, I don't know, it requires strength for you to be able to stand up underneath those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's this, I've heard, sometimes Old Testament people, maybe they're not all Old Testament people, but people kind of emphasize the sort of earthliness of the resurrection, right? That we were created for earth and creation's going to be restored and so forth. But I think, as I was thinking about the book of Revelation and the vision, this idea that we're going to be in heaven, in streets paved with gold in a city, that is a strong and important biblical image that shouldn't be poo-pooed, right?
Okay.
I've sometimes heard it as though I've heard criticism of modern American Christianity emphasizing heaven. Where do those who depart with the sign of faith go? They go to heaven. And then kind of this, it's sometimes tied to this idea of soul sleep, that we were created for earth, and so, the souls of the departed, who depart in the sign of faith, they're going to instantaneously go to the resurrection of the dead on earth, right? And they'll be raised to live in this new creation. Mm-hmm. So, first of all, there's this dislike of the idea of there being an intermediary state and awareness of Christians between death and the resurrection. So that's kind of one issue. And then the other issue is this idea that we're going to abide in heaven rather than on earth. Both of those things are open questions in some sense. Well, the first one for sure, but we don't know a lot about these things. But I think we need to advocate for the fullness of the biblical record and all of the descriptions, rather than sort of picking one as superior to another.
Yeah, I just wonder if they're just using the word in a different sense.
Oh yeah,
it's just shorthand for saying, when God wraps up all the show, we're calling that heaven for now.
Yeah.
Because kind of to say it in its full, it becomes pedantic, but then eventually you have to talk about it a little bit, because if people don't know exactly what the end times are or how they're described, then you miss out on that new earth section.
Right. Mm-hmm. And the physicality of it, the fact that we're still creatures. Yeah, no, I agree. That's why I say I think we need to have the fullness of the biblical record and language. And, it's, we want to but we don't want to emphasize one to the detriment of the other. The kind of heaven language is biblical language,
Right.
And the like. The other thing with the resurrection is, I think, is interesting is the resurrection of Jesus Christ being the central event that defines reality. Is it is the resurrection that emboldens the apostles and changes them from the fear of Good Friday, well, even the fear of Easter evening, right? That when they see the risen Jesus, and then all three of the sacraments, depending on how you count, but Holy Baptism, Holy Communion, and Holy Absolution, they're all resurrection, right? The absolution is given in John 20 in the upper room by the risen Jesus. Peace be with you, right? And then this bestowal of the keys. The sacrament of the altar is the living body and blood of Jesus Christ that we're given. It's not a memorial meal for somebody who is dead, but it's actually the bestowal of the risen body and blood of Christ. And then, of course, the baptism is the actual joining of us to the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So, the life of the New Testament church is, it's the resurrection through and through.
So what does that indicate?
Well, I think this is I think what happens is it ought to embolden us. The Greeks think that the body is a prison, and to the best you can hope for as a pagan Greek is the immortality of the soul in some ethereal plane without our bodies. And the resurrection of the dead is a vindication of creation. That God made a physical reality in creation that he loves and which he's restoring to goodness and even improving in a sense, right? The new heavens and the new earth isn't just a restoration, but it's a glorification. What is given to us in the resurrection of the dead is more than was given to them in the garden because God is a man and has taken up this flesh. And he himself has received this glorified body, this exalted body that we are going to also receive an image of, right? So I think that what happens is, especially in the sacraments, we are learning to live in creation as spiritual beings who expect to live forever. Right. And I think that the way then that we look upon our bodies and the way that we look upon creation and the way that we look upon our fellow humans is all changed to the greater by the doctrine of by the fact that Jesus lives. And that Jesus is a man.
So it's kind of like what St. Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians, 4 and 5, where it's like we have these, mortal tents and we put on immortality. We have these treasures in jars of clay, but we're still of good courage. Like we're not dissuaded from the truth because the glory of God will be revealed in us when we receive that eternal weight of glory. Right.
And, now we haven't even talked about, we've just been talking about the resurrection. We haven't even talked about this boy.
We haven't really talked about the text at all.
We haven't talked about the text at all.
We have past episodes where you could really delve into the text. But the first thing is that came out is that the resurrection, and this does seem like a good opportunity to teach on that. Maybe not the whole sermon. Maybe you'd want just a couple paragraphs on it. Or a few outline points, but how does that fit into then this text, this particular boy?
I think, Jesus hates funerals.
Okay,
Jesus hates death, and Jesus has come to undo death. And it's in. You've got the. That's what he heals the centurion's daughter from, right? That's the danger, of course, in all of these healing miracles, is that they're going to die. And then, of course, it's not just that they're going to die in the sense that they're going to quit living on earth. It's that they're in danger of hellfire. And so Jesus comes to rescue from eternal death. So, I mean, another thing that can be talked about here is, right, the three kinds of death, which are spiritual, eternal, and physical. And, you know, the obvious miracle is the physical death is defeated in this boy, but physical death is not the real enemy. You know, the real enemy is eternal death. And physical death, in fact, can and always is, in the case of Christians, a gift, because it is the normal means of delivering Christians to the Father, right, and to their eternal glory. So I mean, I think all of that is at play here, and I really beautifully, you know, that Jesus says, "Do not weep," right? Yeah. Why in the world? How in the world can he tell this mother not to weep? And you know, if it's don't weep because I can make it better for a few more years, I mean, that's just not good enough, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's really the kind of, in my mind, the sort of key statement that demonstrates what this miracle's about, and that Jesus is about returning husbands to their widows and sons to their mothers, and, right, putting the solitary back into families or establishing families. I mean, you've got all of those things going on. And of course,
do you imagine that the boy is a believer? Like, so what if you believe? What if you imagine that he wasn't? Like, so if he is, like, you're actually taking him away from his bliss.
I know. So that's always a weird thing to think about.
But if he isn't, this is Jesus having compassion on the mother. Maybe she's so distraught because he died outside of the faith.
Oh, there is. I was noticing when you were reading it, I was following along in Greek, and how often the word "her" comes up. I don't know if it was translated every time, but you get quite a bit of, you know, he saw her, and where's it at? Where are we at? Luke 7:11. You know.
Yeah. And 11. When the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said to her.
Yeah. Her. Yeah. You get all of this, like, and then of course you have it. He gives the boy back to her, or I think it just says his mother, but there is a lot of emphasis upon her. And he talks to both of them. He says to her, "Don't weep." He says to the boy, "Arise." Right. And then the boy begins to speak. We don't know what he says. And then he presents him or gives him to his mother. So there is a lot of emphasis upon her, and the compassion was on her, not on him. The splagnidzomai.
Right.
So, or whatever it is. Yeah. So I don't know. I think, I mean, this is the advantage of believing in soul sleep. If you believe in soul sleep, then you don't have a problem, because if the boy was a believer, you know, he's just was pulled out of the sleep, so he had no awareness of the passage of time. But I don't believe in that, so it's kind of it is weird, but it does seem as though there is some intermediary state of some sort.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if he's an unbeliever and we don't believe in, you know, we don't believe in soul sleep, does that mean he was pulled out of hell? I don't know.
I don't know if I want to go there.
I don't know. I don't either. It makes me want to believe it.
It was just.
It's a straight. Lazarus is a problem too.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, Lazarus is more likely. I mean, I'm not saying this boy wasn't a Christian and his mother wasn't. I mean, we don't know anything about him. We don't even know where Nain was. But you know, Lazarus is connected.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what if we just appeal to Philippians 1, to live as Christ and to die as gain?
There you go.
And
but
so,
then that's.
If the Lord gives me more time here, that means fruitful labor for me.
There you go. Even if it's a loss.
Well, I mean, I don't know that he sees it as a loss, does he?
Well, I mean, you had
Paul to remain.
Yeah, but these guys, but Paul's not thinking he might come back. I mean, you're saying to die for this boy was a gain, and then, well, but I'm going to give you got to remain to do more labor. I don't know. It's a strange thing.
It is. Or he just gets more Jesus. To live is Christ. I don't know.
I don't know either. It's a good argument. It's probably I never thought of it in these terms before, but I think it's probably maybe the best argument for soul sleep that I've heard. How do we
Yeah.
deal with these people?
Okay.
I mean, the other, I have a friend that has speculated that actually all of these people, I said, they were all actually brought back and given the resurrection from the last day early, so that he thinks they maybe came back in their actual. Well, and that's gotta be true for the people that died at the Passion of Jesus. I mean, that rose.
Yeah.
During the Passion in Matthew's Gospel. I mean, what happened to those people? Did they live for another 10 years and then die again?
Yeah,
I think they had to all
me.
have been assumed. They had to have been assumed into heaven.
Okay.
They had to have risen, walked around for a while, bore witness, and then how old were they? I mean, we don't know who these people were. They could have been dead for hundreds of years. Where are they going to go live? I don't. That's a strange. Yeah. So those people, I think it certainly makes sense. They were that was the resurrection of the last day for them, and that was a kind of exceptional weirdness.
So they're Elijah or Enoch.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, or of course Saint Mary. But I don't really believe
we don't have any biblical. I mean, we have the historical tradition, and I don't want to poo-poo that completely. But if we're going to base this actually on the scriptures, we're not told about that.
No, I don't believe in that. I'm pretty tempted to poo-poo it, even though it's a tradition. But
well, I mean, I don't want to poo-poo tradition. I guess that's my point. I don't want.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have brought it up. I'm sorry. But anyway, you do have Enoch, who is in the Bible as being taken into heaven, and when we do have the pretty detailed recording of Elijah being taken into heaven without suffering physical death. So you do have those. And we do have the ascension of Jesus. Maybe we should have started there. That after the resurrection of the dead. That's
right.
Imagine that. That's right. This is about Jesus. Right. He is bodily assumed into heaven also. So we do have those examples. So I think those who rise at the Passion, maybe that's when they go. Maybe they walk around until ascension and then they follow him up.
That's really great. Like Lazarus and even the widow, the people from the Old Testament, they're still walking around.
No, I meant the ones from the Passion, but I guess it could be all of them. But yeah, no, I just meant those. I don't think Lazarus in this point.
When Elijah, the armies of the Lord, the chariots and the horses. I mean, maybe that is a vision of the reverse of the ascension coming in from the clouds.
Oh, I like it. That's good. Yeah, that's really good.
So Elijah and Elisha get a vision of the last day early.
I wonder if you could do that with the Valley of Dry Bones also.
Well, I mean, that seems like the crucifixion.
Yeah, so the Valley of Dry Bones, they're raised up. That's the resurrection, but then
and he gave up his spirit.
Yeah. And they're made to be an army.
Yeah, an exceedingly great army.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we don't. I mean, I'm trying to think this through. Do we ever have a depiction of the fighting against in Revelation? Who fights against the devil and his army? It's the Saint Michael and his angels.
Mm-hmm. You get the idea that the devil, when cast down to earth, is fighting against Mary and her son Jesus, and then her other sons and daughters, believers, the apostles,
right,
for their witness.
But I was trying to see if the saints victorious, if the saints in glory are fighting against the devil alongside of the angels, because that would go with your reverse ascension thing, right? Or the Valley of Dry Bones. Those are not angels; those are humans.
Well, I mean, in Revelation 7, you have them all lined up in ranks.
I know, yeah.
I mean,
but
with the tribe of Judah at the front, I'm pretty sure Jesus is leading the tribe of and all the other tribes in an assembled army. This is the image of going to the promised land, the conquest.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never considered that before. I always have thought in terms of spiritual warfare, it's the church militant, church fighting, and the holy angels.
Yeah.
but I wonder what might be the role of the church triumphant in that war.
Oh, yeah.
I've usually thought of it as the church. See, I've usually thought of it. That's where your Valley of Dry Bones and the idea of the reverse ascension, right? I've usually thought of the church triumphant as the church at rest, right? The triumphant, the battle's already over. Well, yeah. So what?
Yeah,
the
how
battle
does
is
Hebrews
over.
talk about it in, what is it, Hebrews 11 or 12? There's the great cloud of witnesses, kind of like they're cheering us on as we cross the finish line.
Maybe it's a little more than cheering.
Yeah.
Maybe they're tripping the guys behind us.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, you have that in Psalm 23. I've always loved that he goes before and also follows us, right? That he's the
leader and the rear
spear,
guard.
but he's also the rear guard, right? He's also cleaning up after us, right? Making sure we don't fall out, all that. Yeah, I like that. The cloud of witnesses that's interesting. I like that. I don't know if we can make a strong biblical case for it, but it seems like there's something to this.
Yeah.
They're not just passively watching. Why would they be? Well, I mean,
right. Well, they're interceding for sure, right? They're making intercessions.
Yeah, that's not passive. Yeah, that's significant. I don't want to. Yeah. Okay. Well, that for sure they're doing.
Yeah.
But I wonder if they aren't actually engaged in the battle more directly.
Well, maybe it's just like their works do follow them. So the very things that they did in life follow them in death in such a manner that it actually serves as an encouragement for those who are still around.
Yeah.
Look at what look at what Boniface did, or look at what Luther did, or name any of the great saints.
Right.
I don't know. That would be a fun deep dive, to try to see what we could parcel together to see if some of these things in the Old Testament are just early revelations of the last coming, like the second coming,
right?
The post-ascension accounts.
Yeah. So again, I think one of our sort of weaknesses is that we just tend to think about the afterlife in such shallow terms, you know, and in cliched ways as well. That's why that emphasis upon the new earth, which is it's biblical, so that makes it important by itself, but also to recognize the physicality of it and the realness of it, that we're not just going to go be angels floating around, sitting on clouds playing harps.
Right.
But also, even when we talk about, the eternity as worship and so forth, or these saints at rest, I wonder if we've been a little bit if we've been a little bit shallow on it.
Yeah, I think there will be rest.
Yeah, of course.
But again, I still think there will be work, but it will be
that's right.
Glorified, redeemed work.
Well, spiritual warfare will end. There won't be warfare, right? The lion will lie down with the lamb. So, we've got all that peace and victory stuff, but, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. I'm going to have to come back and listen to this and take notes on it so that I can try to maybe study some more on that, or maybe one of our listeners has already put it all together.
That's right.
Gone down that road.
Or has 3 or 4 Bible passages that just shoot the whole thing down. That could be too.
Yeah, that's true. The funny thing is, so at Bugenhagen, do you know how many small sectionals came out of discussions on the podcast? I've been to 3 or 4. They said, well, I started thinking about this after so-and-so said something on, Petersen talked about this on the podcast, or
really?
Braaten asked about that. That's just fat. That's so wonderful.
Huh. No, it is nice. No, I didn't know any of that. That's total news to me. So
yeah, it's happened to me 3 or 4 times, and that's just fun.
It is fun. It makes this feel a little more worthwhile.
Yeah. So if we're going to skip down, maybe what kind of fear seized them? Is this a combination of whoa, this is big and God, and I should be afraid of him? Or is this filial fear such that they give glory to God?
I mean, it seems like it's filial because they do glorify God in response to it. And they're not told there's no messianic secret in this time, right? So, and then of course what they say is accurate. A great prophet has risen up among us, and hopefully they're recognizing the Deuteronomy 18 passage. And then
I
God
just
has
love
visited
how delicious that statement is, has arisen among us.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've got all these resurrections and, Jesus is the culmination of those, the eighth one.
Yeah.
I mean, to say a great prophet has arisen, sure, yes, Deuteronomy 18, but literally he will rise and visits his people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, visits his people, I think. I mean, when they're recognizing that, when they're calling Jesus God in that second statement, you know, it, and
He's
So
what's the sense in which Deuteronomy 18 expected God in the flesh? Because you get in Ezekiel, right? Like he himself will shepherd his people.
Right. And the Ancient of Days, I think that's his. Oh, no, that's Daniel.
That's Daniel.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, a prophet like Moses, it seems like that's a reference to the humanity of Jesus.
So maybe this is putting together he is God and a man.
Yeah, I don't know. Though you have Moses, Moses goes up the mountain and his face shines. I mean, Moses is the prophet par excellence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do the people of the Old Testament distinguish between God visiting his people and what the prophets speak?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So maybe it's not as quote unquote,
but it does seem that when they say God is
thinking.
Yeah. I think God has visited his people is very incarnational, though, that language. But yeah, episcopus. He bishops the people. He oversees them. Shepherds them, oversees them. Yeah, visited is kind of not a good translation, I think, because visited in my mind implies temporary.
Oh,
right. Yeah. If I go for a visit, I don't abide there. But this is, he's overseeing his people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well, he's the watchman,
I like that.
Right?
He's the watchman. Yeah. Well, he's more than the watchman. The watchman guards against enemies. External. He's also the pedagogue, right? He's also the leader that's teaching the people, and he's looking both directions. He's looking at them to make sure they have what they need and they're not doing things they shouldn't. And then he's also guarding. Mm-hmm. But anyway,
it's almost like the reestablishment of God as king.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's the kings, the rulers who would make visitations.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And the visitation is always, there's a negative and a positive aspect, right? And the negative aspect is received in filial fear. I mean, this is like, school accreditation. When the CCLE rolls up here and to accredit our school, it's a little uncomfortable. But we rejoice in it because we learn things in it. I mean, and we trust them, right? Yeah. We believe they're good people and they're competent and they're coming in love. And when they tell us that we're doing something wrong, we're like, right. And we don't want to keep doing that. Thank you. But, still it is a negative aspect. It's humiliating.
Yeah.
In a good way.
In a good way, yeah.
But they also bring praise, right? Mm-hmm. You're doing this really well, and we're going to tell other schools about this. There's that. Anyway, that visitation is supportive and encouraging, but it's also rebuking.
Yeah.
But
it comes from a trust in the nature of the one who visits.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I believe they're coming because they love us.
Yeah.
And they love what we're doing. And they're coming supportively. And that you can think about the Saxon visitation, right? I mean, that's the idea of the bishop coming too.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
But their response, this is great, that they know this because of the resurrection of the overcoming of death. So they could have the Isaiah passage in mind, but I think also even without that, they just recognize that this is the living God, and He's the God of the living, and death has no dominion over Him.
Yeah,
and this is how they know. I mean, this is the essence of God. It's funny. I think.
Before you get there, do you think there's a sense in which, like, Adam and Eve not being put to death immediately is a resurrection account, in the same way that Hebrews talks about Isaac being saved from the knife is a type of the resurrection?
Boy, I don't know. Adam and Eve, to say that's a kind of resurrection.
I mean, in the day that you eat of it, you will surely die.
Die, right.
He makes a sacrifice and they live.
Yeah, I know, but I don't want to call it. I mean, but they're not. Seems like they're. I suppose. I mean, they're spared death. Mm-hmm. Being spared death or spared punishment
is different than resurrection.
Different resurrection. It's like the Passover. Well, all the sacrifices.
But then, how do you Hebrews speaks this way about Isaac?
Does it?
Hebrews calls it a type of the resurrection.
Well, I want to read it now. Where is that? Do you remember?
The Hall of Faith, so Hebrews 11.
Hebrews 11. Let's see what it says. By faith, Noah, Abraham, when he's attested, whom it said, Isaac, your seed. But that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. There you go. Well, I suppose then that would be true of the Exodus. That'd be true of every time that somebody spared death and someone else is sacrificed or something else is sacrificed for him. So in Adam and Eve.
Yeah, so we should, so maybe there's actually resurrection all over the Old Testament that we just have
all
missed.
Over the Old Testament. Yeah. Every time. I suppose you could say that then after the golden calf incident too, right. Then every time they're deserving death and then, they're spared and a substitute's made who dies in their place. I mean, I think
so. The substitutionary atonement necessitates a resurrection.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the double jeopardy thing.
Yeah.
If someone's died for you, then you can't be, right? The law has been satisfied. It has no more to ask.
Yeah.
Jesus is the only one who actually dies.
Uh-huh.
So this is sort of like the ram caught in the thicket,
mm-hmm.
Walking up to the gates of Nain and stopping. No, I'll go in his place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, or the scapegoat. He's outside.
Oh, the scapegoat. Yeah, the scapegoat. Absolutely. Yeah, all of it. I mean, all the sacrifices.
It's all part of it. But that I kind of like that, like using Hebrews 11 as a way to say, actually, the resurrection motif is all over the Old Testament.
Yeah, I do. I like that too. Yeah. I mean, even if it's not in those explicit terms, Hebrews interprets it in such a way that, right, that we should see that as Isaac was deserving of death. He was as good as dead.
Yes.
Right. You could also, I suppose you could do that with the victim who was saved by the Good Samaritan as well. He was left there, half dead.
Yeah.
And then somebody intervened and rescued him from that.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
And this report, the report of him raising, or the report that a great prophet has risen and God has visited, or do you separate those out?
I think it's one report. Yeah. I think, the report is a great prophet has risen up among us who raised this boy from the dead, right? That's how we know he's a great prophet, or how we know that God has visited us because of this. I think it's a single thing.
Uh-huh.
It can't just be,
that the Israelites, just so you think Moses, who brings the resurrection about for the people of Israel, and then you've got Elijah and Elisha. What other great prophets do this?
That do it explicitly with somebody that's dead, only those. And then you have the vision in Ezekiel. You have Jonah again, right? Was Jonah actually dead? He could have been, actually.
Yeah.
But in terms of actually people that were dead, that were resuscitated or whatever.
Well, I just mean like if we're looking at the theme according to Hebrews, the resurrection theme,
well, then
what other prophets do this? I mean, this would be Nathan with David.
Yeah, I suppose, or even Elijah with Naaman, who's has a death sentence on him. I mean, so again, the healings, you could, but Nathan with David would probably be a better one because David's spiritually dead and is raised. Yeah, I mean, you can. And
he's under his own condemnation. This man should die.
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, yeah. Which, that's a whole interesting thing because actually, the guy shouldn't really die. David it's not a just judgment. He stole one lamb and you're going to kill him for it. I mean, how about repay the lamb with, 2 lambs, or even if you want to go the Zacchaeus route, 4. But, that's not David's judgment is so harsh. He's self-righteous.
A rash judgment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Geez.
Well, there you go.
Anything
else?
A
lot of stuff. Well, I mean, nothing else. We didn't deal with the text real deliberately, but I think that's okay. I think the resurrection stuff is good. There is this, I wonder if, our kind of emphasis on forensic justification and the forgiveness of sins maybe could use some nuance from resurrection stuff. I mean, do we find it easier to preach on Good Friday than Easter? And if so, maybe there's something a little bit wrong with us because the apostles don't seem to have any trouble. And I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't preach forensic justification and the vicarious satisfaction and the forgiveness of sins, but I do wonder if we need to recognize the life theme in Scripture as well, a little more prominently maybe. And this is a good Sunday to do it.
What does the account of Jesus raising the widow's son at Nain mean to you? I mean, what I mean by that is, you've talked about this before, right? C.S. Lewis says that reason is the organ of truth, but the imagination is the organ of meaning. And so if our imagination is the ability to create a mental picture in our mind of what's happening, like when we think of Jesus raising the widow's son, I might see something different than you would. Like I might see like my own people and you would see your own people. Maybe you would, maybe somebody else would see someone who is kind of spiritually dead and hopes that they're raised and brought back into the faith. Like in our mind's eye, we might all see something different. Just like if I said dog or cat, you might see a particular dog or cat that I'm seeing a different particular one, but we still have the same truth in mind and it's a different meaning to us. So how do we bring that out in our preaching in terms of okay, we have the truth of what God's word says, and this is what it means for you.
I think it's still all
does such baptizing with water indicate? Right.
I think it's all wrapped up in the first words of Jesus, do not weep.
Okay.
And that even if Jesus doesn't stop you on the way to the cemetery to bury your loved ones, he still says, do not weep, because he's going to raise them and he's going to raise you and you're going to see them again. And, he died and he rose, so don't weep. And, he doesn't say that with cruelty, right, or insensitivity, but I think that's the real point of this. What he did for this woman, he promises and is doing for all of us.
Yeah.
And maybe you could even take it to the unbelieving adult children that we're always talking about, that even there, right, that in all of the things that are disturbing you and haunting you and keep you awake at night, regrets over past sins, concerns about the future of our country or for your children or whatever it would be, right? All of this is really wrapped up in this promise. Jesus doesn't say, do not weep because you're annoying him, right? He wants you to stop it. He says, do not weep because there's nothing to weep over because he lives.
So maybe like the correspondence to, because it does say it, fear sees them all. The correspondence is instead fear God with filial
And
fear
glorify him.
glorify him, that a great prophet has risen among us and that God visits his people.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how in our day, how do we glorify God with those things?
I mean, I think we've got to bear witness to this in the world. I mean, to each other, we're confessing for one another to encourage one another, like on Sunday morning and hymns of praise and the like, and confession, but also in our homes, right? To our families, to our children, this has got to be a daily activity that we hear God's word and respond to it. Not only on Sunday morning, but then also, the report went out to all the surrounding region, right? That we do need to be emboldened and encouraged to tell the truth about the resurrection at work or at school or in the grocery store. We need to be, I think the pressure to be silent about spiritual things is greater than it's ever been before, right? The awkwardness or the embarrassment of it. And we need to resist that and glorify God.
Yeah.
And, maybe it's just even in things like just saying, God bless you to people and, or God be, just speaking in ways that are consistent with our faith in places that are not consistent with our faith. Maybe that doesn't mean you start the meeting, at First National Bank with a prayer, but maybe it does mean that, when you're talking with your coworkers and you're talking about something good that has happened, you say, God be praised.
Yeah.
So
in other words, it's kind of like you don't go out and start a mission. You just see that your mission is there in your living room, around your dining room table, wherever you encounter the world in your daily living.
Yeah, throughout all Judea and the surrounding regions. So that's got to mean it's at home first, but it also means that we should be identifiable as Christians. To our neighbors.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I think that's helpful to be able to say, so where does this begin? It begins at home, right?
Yeah.
And it begins, that church is important, or then if it's at home, then it's going to be carried out outside of those 4 walls or those 8 walls, if you include church.
Yeah. If we're just praising God all the time, this is our natural language, to be thanking and praising God in our daily speech, right?
Yeah.
Giving witness to the hope that's in us. We're doing that with our children. We're doing that, with the people we love. And, this is, we don't change it just because we're on the subway, or just because we're in a evolutionist's classroom, we still,
So the fear of the woman that she's going to be alone and she's lost everything is an emotion that is, what's the word that you always use about inordinate? So she has inordinate fear for the things of this life, and not enough fear of the one who stands before her, of God who comes to visit.
Right. Yeah. So do not weep.
Yeah.
What a beautiful command.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it is, because it's like, stop hurting.
Yeah.
Stop believing lies. Stop, stop thinking you're stupid. Stop thinking, right? I mean, it's okay. It's a beautiful command. Do not weep. What you've been told's a lie. Why are you believing that?
Yeah.
Why are you sad? Don't be sad. It's a beautiful thing.
That's great. Like what it means not to weep. It means, stop believing the lies that people tell you. And
right.
Luther talks about how good Satan is in his Galatians lectures, how good Satan is at deceiving our senses.
Interesting.
When St. Paul says, "Oh, foolish Galatians, who bewitched you?" That this is all a bewitching of the senses and of the mind. and how good he is at that. And the only way out of that is the commands and promises of God in the Bible. That's what sets it straight.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what reorients us back to reality is the Bible. Because we get so distracted and confused and lost, right? We have to always come back to the North Star and, his paths, his ways.
Are you preaching on this?
I'm not.
Okay.
I know. See, once a month now, I don't preach.
I bet you want to now after our discussion.
I always want to, but it's good to share, and it's good to learn that, and I mean it's good for the people because they're benefiting greatly from past, and I am too, from the other pastors preaching. So,
all right. Well, we'll pick up, I guess, next week with Trinity 17.
All right. Thank you.